And the award for Breakthrough Consultancy of the Year goes to Phoenix Strategies, led by Hadley Blackwood. Applause echoes through the Hilton Chicago ballroom as I rise to my feet, subtly adjusting my navy blue blazer, not the traditional black one my father always insisted was the only appropriate color for serious business. As I make my way to the stage, I catch sight of familiar faces in the crowd. At the table near the center, Eliza Chen, CEO of Chen Innovations and my very first major client, claps with genuine enthusiasm. 3 tables ahead, James Harrison, who gave up decades of job security to join my company, beams with fatherly pride. And in the last row, nearly hidden in the shadows, my mother Diana stands applauding through tear-filled eyes, openly defying my father's explicit wishes for the family to boycott this event. My father, of course, is not here. Neither is my brother. As I accept the elegant glass trophy, I can't help but reflect on how exactly 1 year ago, I sat at a family dinner listening to my father announce that my younger brother, who could barely show up to work on time, would be the next president of the very company I had spent a decade helping to build. Phoenix Strategies began with just 3 people in a co-working space. I begin my speech, my voice steadier than I feel inside. Today, we're a team of 22 passionate consultants, serving clients who believe that skill and innovation matter more than tradition and last names. I pause briefly, and my gaze drifts toward the Phoenix logo projected on the screen behind me. An elegant blue and gold phoenix rising from the ashes. Just like me. They say sometimes you have to be broken to discover what you're really made of, I continue. So, to everyone who didn't believe in me, thank you. You gave me the drive to build something bigger than I ever imagined. The unspoken words hang in the air. Thank you, Dad, for showing me the door. It was exactly the exit I needed. As I wrap up my speech and the applause resumes, a silent question seems to echo through the room. How did we get here? How did the disposable daughter of the Blackwoods become the competitor now challenging her father's empire? To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning, or rather, to the end of everything I believed was my future. Months earlier. We're gathered here not just to celebrate my 40 years at the helm of Blackwood Consulting, but to announce the next chapter in our company's history. My father, Victor Blackwood, was in his element. Standing at the head of the long oak dining table in our family home, champagne flute raised, flashing that charismatic smile that had charmed executives for 4 decades. The chandelier's light danced off his neatly groomed gray hair, highlighting the sharp features he often reminded us had opened doors in Chicago before I even said a word. I looked around the table. My mother, Diana, sat to his right, wearing the tight, practiced smile I recognized from countless corporate events. Bennett, my younger brother, sat to Dad's left, inexplicably nervous despite apparently having nothing at stake in the announcement. A few longtime executives and their spouses rounded out the scene. As you all know, I built Blackwood from the ground up, transforming it from a 3-client boutique consultancy into one of the Midwest's most respected firms, my father continued. But every founder must eventually pass the baton. My heart started to race. This was the moment. 10 years of relentless work, starting as a trainee and climbing every rung of the corporate ladder until I became VP of Operations. Sleepless. Nights with spreadsheets and proposals. Countless personal sacrifices, including a broken engagement because it wasn't the right time to start a family. It would all be worth it if my father finally acknowledged that I, not despite being his daughter, but precisely because of who I am, deserved to lead the company I had helped modernize and grow. It is with great pride that I announce that, starting next quarter, I will be stepping down from the role of CEO. He paused for dramatic effect, and passing the leadership of Blackwood Consulting into the capable hands of Bennett Blackwood. Time froze. The clinking of silverware and glasses sounded distant, as if I were underwater. Bennett? Bennett, who had only been at the company for 18 months after dropping out of 3 colleges and taking a 2-year sabbatical, traveling through Europe? Bennett, who rarely showed up to strategy meetings and when he did, spent half the time checking his phone? I forced a smile as the guests applauded. My mother glanced at me briefly, a barely disguised look of apology in her eyes, before quickly looking away. Bennett looked both smug and uncomfortable, like a child who'd been given a gift he secretly knew he didn't deserve. I know Bennett will continue the Blackwood legacy with the same dedication and vision that built our reputation, my father concluded, placing a hand on my brother's shoulder. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of small talk and discussions about the company's future, my future, being talked about as if I wasn't even there. 3 hours later, the guests had already left. My mother retreated to her room, citing a migraine. Bennett went out to celebrate with some friends. I found my father in his study, sipping a brandy while going through some papers. "We need to talk," I announced from the doorway, not bothering to knock. He looked up, not exactly surprised. "I figured you'd come. Close the door." I walked in and sat in the chair across from his desk. The same chair I'd sat in at age 12 to learn about profit margins, at 16 to discuss which universities had the best business programs, and at 22 to present my 5-year career plan. For the company, why Bennett? I asked directly, skipping any preamble. My father sighed, setting his brandy down on the desk. "Hadley, you're brilliant. No one questions that. Your contributions to Blackwood have been invaluable. But not invaluable enough for the presidency," I finished for him. "Blackwood Consulting has always been led by men," he said, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "There's a reason for that. Our clients, many of them traditional corporate leaders, expect a certain profile at the top. A profile with a Y chromosome, apparently. Don't be reductive," he scolded gently. "It's more complicated than that." "Then explain the complexity to me, Dad. Explain why Bennett, who didn't even finish undergrad, is more qualified than I am, with an MBA from Harvard and a decade at the company." "Bennett is my son and natural heir," he stated, his voice firm. "You can keep being the brains behind the operation, but he'll be the face of the company. That's how business works." His words hit like a physical punch. "He's a man, you're just a woman." That's what he was really saying, even if not in those exact words. "And what if clients prefer dealing with me as they already do?" I challenged. "They'll adapt. Bennett has natural charisma. He just needs time to learn the technical details." Technical details? That's how you classify 10 years of institutional knowledge and client relationships? My father stood, signaling the conversation was over. "Hadley, you've always been ambitious, and I admire that. But some battles can't be won with competence alone. Accept my decision. Keep thriving as VP of Operations. Keep Bennett on track. We'll all benefit." I stood up too, my fists clenched at my sides. "And what if I don't accept it?" He looked at me with an expression that mixed confusion and disappointment. "And where would you go?" "Blackwood is your legacy just as much as it is Bennett's, just in different ways." I left without responding, shutting the door with more force than necessary. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath to hold back the angry tears threatening to fall. "Hadley?" My mother's soft voice surprised me. She was standing a few feet ahead, still dressed elegantly, her migraine clearly an excuse to escape dinner. I'm sorry." "You knew?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked away. "Answer enough. And you said nothing? You didn't." "Defend me? Your father? He's from another generation, sweetheart. He truly believes he's doing what's best for everyone except me." My mother stepped closer, touching my arm hesitantly. "When I gave up my career to support your father, I thought it was temporary, that I'd eventually return to my research, my teaching, but each year made it harder, until eventually, I stopped trying." Her eyes met mine, suddenly intense. "Don't make my mistakes, Hadley. Don't wait for men like your father to change just because you're too competent to be ignored. They'll always find justifications." She walked away as quietly as she had appeared, leaving me alone with a storm of thoughts. That night in my apartment, I stared at the ceiling for hours, playing out every possible scenario I could accept. The decision and remain number 2, the unrecognized brain behind the company's face. Fight for the presidency, potentially starting a family war that could harm the business and my client relationships. Walk away on principle, with no clear plan in place. Something else. Something I hadn't fully considered yet. As I finally drifted off to sleep, an idea began to take shape. It wouldn't be quick, it wouldn't be easy. But maybe, just maybe, my father had unintentionally given me the push I needed to build something greater than Blackwood Consulting could ever be under his shadow. Week 1 after the announcement. Hadley, you got a minute? Bennett stood at the door to my office, holding some overpriced coffee from an artisanal cafe and looking absurdly young in his tailored suit, a gift from our father to look the part of a president. Sure, I replied, keeping my voice neutral, as I closed the tab with the financial projections I'd been reviewing. He walked in and shut the door, something unusual for Bennett, who generally preferred open conversations where others could witness his new status. Look, I know the situation is weird, he began, sitting in the chair across from my desk. I want you to know I value everything you've built here. I'm not trying to overshadow that. Thanks for the sentiment, I said, my tone perhaps drier than intended. Actually, I was thinking, nothing has to change, you know? I can be president on paper, handle the PR stuff, schmooze clients, that kind of thing. You keep running the operations, strategy, what you do best. He smiled, that classic Blackwood confident smile. We'll be partners, just with different titles. Partners, as if a decade-long gap in experience and completely different decision-making authority were just minor details. Bennett, I appreciate the offer, but let's be realistic. Being president isn't just a title. It means making final calls, setting strategic direction, representing the company's values. Yeah, of course, he nodded, clearly not grasping the weight of the role. But I'll always check with you before any major decision. Promise. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it quickly. Gotta take this. Lunch later this week to keep talking? He left before I could answer. Week 3 after the announcement, the first formal meeting of the executive committee with Bennett as president-designate was, to say the least, revealing. So, for the next quarter, I concluded my presentation, I recommend focusing on expanding our digital transformation services to mid-sized clients. Our analysis shows a significant gap in the market that we could fill using expertise we already possess, just repackaged for this segment. Meticulously prepared slides, financial projection spreadsheets, and a detailed implementation plan backed up my proposal. 3 months' worth of research and team discussions. James Harrison, our longtime CFO, nodded in approval. Other executives murmured in agreement. Interesting, Bennett said, drumming his fingers on the table. But I've been thinking about something different. All eyes turned to him. I believe we should target the luxury segment. Big corporations, high-level executives, our fees could triple. He smiled, energized by his vision. Picture it, Blackwood Consulting, the McKinsey of Chicago. An awkward silence filled the room. Bennett, I began cautiously. While the high-end market is tempting, our analysis shows it's extremely saturated, with players who've been established for decades. The barrier to entry. Sometimes we need to think outside the box, right? He interrupted. Dad always said opportunities appear when we dare more than the competition. Yes, but let's do this. I'll prepare a presentation about my vision for the next meeting. In the meantime, we can keep your plan as a backup. The message was clear. My thoroughly researched strategy had just been demoted to Plan B in favor of an ungrounded idea, likely born during some extravagant lunch with friends. After the meeting, James caught me in the hallway. That was interesting, he commented quietly. You mean a disaster, I muttered. He's new at this. Give it time. Time isn't the issue, James. Experience and judgment are. James glanced around, making sure we were alone. I spoke with Victor yesterday. He's aware of Bennett's learning curve. He suggested we keep bringing you into all the key meetings for now. As the babysitter of a 28-year-old president, I said bitterly. As the expert you are, he gently corrected me. Week 7 after the announcement. The email landed at 10:47 a.m. Emergency meeting, Chen Innovations, 2 p.m., Bennett and Hadley attendance mandatory. Chen Innovations was our largest client. Eliza Chen, their CEO, was personally involved in every aspect of our consulting relationship, a connection I had carefully cultivated over 5 years. "What's going on?" I asked Bennett when I ran into him in the elevator on the way to the conference room. He shrugged. "Probably just want to meet the new president before the announcement goes public." "Bennett, Eliza doesn't schedule emergency meetings for social introductions. Something's wrong." "Relax, Hadley. I've got this." The hollow confidence in his voice sent a chill down my spine. When we entered the conference room, Eliza was already there, accompanied by her CFO and CTO. Her usually warm expression was noticeably serious. "Bennett Hadley," she greeted formally. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Always a pleasure, Eliza," Bennett replied with his rehearsed charm, extending his hand. "I look forward to strengthening our partnership even further once I officially take over next month." Eliza shook his hand briefly, then turned directly to me. "Hadley, we received the revised proposal for our West Coast expansion last night." I froze. "What revised proposal?" I had personally finalized that proposal 2 weeks ago after countless discussions with the Chen team. "I must say we're confused," Eliza continued. "The new approach contradicts nearly everything we agreed on over the last 3 months of planning, especially the suggestion to postpone the tech expansion in favor of luxury marketing." All eyes turned to Bennett, who suddenly looked far less confident. "I believed that a few strategic changes would benefit the project as a whole," he explained vaguely. "Sometimes an outside perspective brings valuable insights." "An outside perspective?" Chen's CFO leaned forward. "I thought you'd been at Blackwood for over a year. That hardly qualifies you as an outsider." "What we want to know," Eliza interjected, "is whether this new direction represents Blackwood Consulting's official stance. Because if it does, we seriously need to reconsider our partnership." Bennett looked at me in a panic, hoping I'd bail him out. In that moment, I had a choice. I could smooth things over, explain there had been a misunderstanding, that the original proposal still stood, or I could let Bennett face the consequences of his impulsive decision. "Bennett," I began, choosing my words carefully, "maybe you can walk us through your reasoning behind the changes, since it was your initiative." The next 20 minutes were painfully uncomfortable. Bennett tried to explain his vision, contradicted himself multiple times, and eventually admitted he hadn't consulted the technical team before rewriting significant parts of the proposal. By the end of the meeting, we managed to convince Eliza to give us a week to submit a revised proposal, essentially reverting to the original version I had prepared. In the elevator ride down, Bennett exploded, "You made me look like an idiot in there!" "You altered a $2.4 million proposal without consulting anyone on the team who spent months working on it," I replied calmly. "I didn't need to help with that." "I'm the president. I can make changes when I see fit." "Acting president," I corrected. "And being president doesn't mean ignoring expertise and established processes. It means leading wisely." "So condescending, as always," he muttered. "No wonder Dad chose me. Nobody wants to work with someone who acts like they're better than everyone else all the time." That comment hurt more than I cared to admit. Week 10 after the announcement, I was in my office reviewing reports when I heard voices coming from the adjacent break room, the door slightly ajar. "Dude, seriously, how are you dealing with all this?" A voice I recognized as Tyler's, Bennett's longtime friend who often showed up at our social events. "It's a nightmare," Bennett replied, his voice low but clear. "Every day there's some crisis to fix, some unhappy client, some employee questioning my decisions. I thought you had assistants to handle that stuff." Bennett let out a humorless laugh. "I've got Hadley, who's basically a glorified assistant now. She cleans up my messes, but always with that, 'I told you so' look." My fingers froze on the keyboard. "At least the salary makes up for it, right?" Tyler asked. "The salary's amazing, and the title on my business card impresses people at parties." Bennett paused. "But between us, I have no idea what I'm doing. Zero qualifications for this. I'm just lucky I was born with the right chromosome, you know. They laughed. Your dad really should have given the company to your sister, Tyler said casually. She seems like she actually knows what she's doing. Probably, Bennett agreed, to my surprise. But tradition is tradition. And honestly, I'm not going to complain about inheriting an empire just because I was born a guy. I backed away from the door silently, my mind racing with what I just heard. It wasn't just Bennett's shocking admission of incompetence or his view of me as a glorified assistant. It was the casual way both of them accepted the injustice of the whole situation. I sat back at my desk, a sudden clarity forming in my mind. For 10 years, I'd worked tirelessly, hoping for recognition in a fundamentally broken system. A system that would never see me beyond my gender, no matter how competent I proved to. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. Kate? It's Hadley. Can we meet for coffee? I need to discuss some legal possibilities. Kate Winters, my best friend since college and a corporate lawyer, was exactly who I needed right now. Of course. Did something happen? Let's just say I'm considering some career changes. Big ones. That afternoon, as we discussed contract clauses, non-competes, and intellectual property over coffee at a quiet table far from Blackwood, a plan began to take shape. It wouldn't be quick, it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in weeks, I felt something beyond anger and resentment. I felt hope. You're absolutely right, Mr. Petersham. Your concern is completely valid. I watched Bennett standing in the conference room, trying to appease Douglas Petersham, CEO of Midwest Manufacturing and our third largest client. The quarterly report Bennett had approved, without properly reading it, contained projections that directly contradicted the strategy we had established with their team the previous month. The report suggests cutting the Sustainable Products division, which is exactly the segment we agreed to expand. Petersham pointed at the document, frustration clear in his voice. I feel like we're talking to different parts of Blackwood. Bennett shot a quick glance at me, silently begging for help. This was already the third time this week I had to step in to salvage a client relationship. Mr. Petersham, I interjected. There was clearly a communication error. The report you received was a preliminary draft that should not have been sent out. I apologize for the confusion. That wasn't true, of course. The report was the final version Bennett had approved after making changes without consulting the original team. Another hour was spent repairing the damage, with promises of a revised report within 48 hours. When Petersham finally left, Bennett collapsed into a chair. That was a disaster. It was, I agreed plainly, offering none of the reassurance he was clearly hoping for. I don't understand why the team sent the wrong version, he muttered defensively. They sent exactly what you approved, Bennett. The report you altered without consulting anyone from the original team. I'm the president. I can make changes. Yes, you can, and you can also deal with the consequences of those changes. I gathered my documents, preparing to leave, which for now includes rewriting the entire report by tomorrow. You're going to help me, right? The panic in his voice was almost tangible. 3 months ago, I would have automatically said yes. 3 months ago, I was still trying. To prove myself, still working within the system. No, Bennett. I have my own team to manage and promises to keep. You'll have to handle this on your own. The shocked expression on his face nearly made me smile as I walked out. 2 days later, Hadley, can we talk? My father stood in the doorway of my office, his serious tone indicating this wasn't a casual chat. Of course, come in, he closed the door and sat heavily in the chair across from my desk. He looked tired, older than I remembered. I got a disturbing call from Douglas Petersham yesterday. The report was corrected and delivered on time, I replied evenly. Bennett finally fixed the issue. After spending the night in the office, my father noted, alone. That wasn't my responsibility. My father studied me carefully. You've always supported your teams, Hadley. Always taken responsibility for the projects under your supervision. And I still do. But Bennett deliberately altered a report my team prepared meticulously without consulting us, so he can deal with the consequences. He's learning. He needs your guidance. No, Dad. He needs competence, something you should have considered before making him president. My father sighed, running a hand through his graying hair, a rare gesture that signaled genuine concern. I'm worried about you, Hadley. These past few months, you've been different, less engaged, more distant. Interesting that you noticed, I replied, unable to hide the hint of bitterness in my voice, considering my 10 years of dedication weren't enough for you to see my worth when it actually mattered. This is still about the presidency? He shook his head, exasperated. I thought we were past that. Past it? Because you decided it was over? I leaned forward. No, Dad, this isn't something you just get past. It fundamentally changed my standing in this company and the way I see my future here. A heavy silence settled between us. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something like regret on my father's face, quickly replaced by his usual resolute expression. Blackwood is your legacy just as much as it is Bennett's, he finally said, falling back on the same familiar argument. Your role is different, but just as vital. My role is subordinate to his, despite my greater experience and proven competence. That's not different, it's unequal. The world isn't always fair, Hadley. I thought I taught you that. Oh, you did, I replied calmly. More than you realize. A week later, the breaking point came. Faster than I expected. It was a seemingly routine budget meeting. Bennett, drunk on his newfound power, had unilaterally decided to eliminate the diversity and inclusion program I had implemented 2 years prior, a program that not only improved our corporate culture, but also attracted significant talent that would have otherwise never considered a traditional consultancy like Blackwood. It's too expensive and unnecessary, Bennett declared as he presented his proposed cuts. We need to focus on initiatives that directly impact the bottom line. I looked around the table, 12 executives, 10 of them men, all white except for James, who looked visibly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. This program has delivered measurable returns, I argued, keeping my voice deliberately calm as I slid impact reports across the table. A 23% reduction in employee turnover, an 18% increase in qualified diverse applicants, 3 new clients who chose us specifically because of our reputation for inclusivity. Numbers can be easily manipulated, Bennett replied with a dismissive shrug. The reality is we're spending nearly $300,000 a year on this program. That money could be better used for marketing or bonuses for high-performing consultants. The unspoken message was clear. Bonuses for people who looked like him and his friends. Did you even read the full reports before deciding to cut the program? I asked. Bennett flushed slightly. I read enough to make an executive decision. Executive decision, I repeated slowly. Based on what, exactly? Certainly not on data or long-term strategy. Hadley, Bennett warned, his tone hardening. I've made my decision. The program will be discontinued next quarter. I looked around at the faces at the table, some avoiding eye contact, others watching the clash unfold with interest. I realized in that moment that this room, this company, this suffocating family dynamic, none of it was going to change. Not for me. I closed my folder deliberately. If that's the case, then I believe we need to have another conversation, Bennett, in private. After the meeting ended, we stayed behind in the conference room. What the hell was that? He demanded. You practically challenged me in front of the entire executive team. Because you're making a huge mistake, I said. That program isn't just diversity theater. It's a strategic initiative that set us apart in the market. You're overstating your importance. 3 of the senior managers hired through that program will likely resign once they hear about this, Bennett shrugged. Then we'll hire others. And the clients who came to us specifically because of our reputation in this area? Clients come to us for the quality of our work, not for charity programs. I took a deep breath, controlling the anger that threatened to spill over. So that's your final stance? Cut the program, ignoring all the data that shows its value? It's my decision as president, he replied, a smug smile forming on his lips. Unless you'd like to take it up with Dad. And there it was, the ever-present, underlying family dynamic, the favored son, secure in the knowledge that the patriarch would take his side. That won't be necessary, I responded calmly. I just wanted to confirm. 3 days later, my resignation letter was perfectly typed on Blackwood letterhead, a bitter irony that didn't escape me. 1 month's notice, just as my contract required. I scheduled the meeting with my father for 9 a.m. before Bennett arrived. He rarely showed up before 10. James was present at my request, both as a witness and to discuss the transition. "What's so urgent it needed a special meeting?" my father asked, pouring himself a coffee. Without a word, I slid the envelope across the table. He opened it, his eyebrows rising higher with each line he read. When he finished, he looked at me with an expression I'd rarely seen. Genuine surprise. "Is this some kind of stunt? A cry for attention?" "No, Dad. It's my formal resignation, effective after the 1-month notice period, as outlined in my contract." "This is ridiculous," he declared, pushing the paper back toward me. "You're upset with Bennett, I get it. But walking away from the family business? The legacy I built for you?" "The legacy you've made abundantly clear was never truly mine," I corrected softly. "And I'm not walking away from anything. I'm choosing a different path." "What path? Where could you possibly go that offers the same opportunities you have here?" It was the same question he'd asked months ago, but this time I had an answer. "That's the thing about opportunity, Dad. Sometimes you have to create it yourself." James, silent until now, finally spoke. "Victor, I think we should take this seriously. Hadley has been instrumental to our operations. Her departure will be a significant challenge." "Nonsense," my father replied, though his tone lacked its usual certainty. "No one is irreplaceable." "True," I agreed, "but some people are harder to replace than others. A month should be enough to document my current processes and transition my clients to other teams." "Your clients?" my father repeated, his voice dangerously low. "The clients belong to Blackwood Consulting, not to you personally." "Of course," I agreed formally. "And they'll stay with Blackwood, unless they choose otherwise." Something, in my words, made my father narrow his eyes. "What exactly are you planning, Hadley?" "I'm planning to move forward professionally. Nothing more, nothing less." "Where to? Which company is hiring you?" "No company is hiring me." A realization began to dawn in his eyes. "You can't compete with us. Your contract has non-compete clauses." "Which only apply to working for established direct competitors," I finished for him. "Kate Winters went through my contract thoroughly. There's nothing preventing me from starting my own business, as long as I don't actively solicit Blackwood clients." For a moment, my father was speechless, something I had never seen before. "You'd really do this?" he finally asked, his voice softer. "Leave everything we've built?" "Everything I've built," I gently corrected. "And yes, I would. My decision is final." As I walked out of his office, I felt a massive weight lift from my shoulders. The next month would be intense. Transition, documentation, final preparations for my new venture. But for the first time in a long while, I was walking towards something, not just away. In the hallway, I found James waiting for me. "You're really doing it," he said. "Not a question." "I am. And your plan?" "I'd rather not go into details just yet," I replied carefully. He nodded in understanding. "I get it. But when you're ready to talk about it..." "Well, I've been doing the same job here for nearly 2 decades. Maybe it's time to consider new challenges." I looked at him, surprised. James, who had been with my father since the beginning, was hinting he might follow me? "Let's grab a coffee when the time is right," I suggested. "I'll be waiting for your call," he replied with a small smile. That afternoon, the news spread quickly throughout the company. Across the office, I received all kinds of looks, some shocked, some sympathetic, some speculative. Bennett avoided me entirely, likely processing the new reality where he would actually have to learn the business instead of relying on me to cover for his shortcomings. As I packed up documents in my office, carefully separating personal items from company property, I found an old photo in the bottom drawer. Me and my father at my MBA graduation, both smiling broadly. "Someday all this will be yours," he had said that day, gesturing vaguely toward the Chicago skyline. At the time, I took it as a promise about Blackwood. Now I realized there was another interpretation. The skyline was bigger than a single company, and maybe, just maybe, he was right. Just not in the way either of us imagined. Month after fee, leaving. Welcome to Phoenix Strategies, Kate toasted, raising a glass of cheap champagne in our semi-furnished office in the co-working space. I still can't believe you actually did it. I smiled, looking around the modest but promising space. 2 private offices and access to a shared conference room, all in a renovated building in the West Loop, far enough from the financial district where Blackwood was based to avoid awkward run-ins, but close enough to be convenient for prospective clients. Sometimes I can't believe it either, I admitted, sipping my drink. 17 messages from Bennett just today, by the way. Apparently he can't find the projections file for Robertson Technologies. You documented everything meticulously before you left, Kate pointed out. It's not your fault if he can't follow basic instructions. Marcus Whitman, one of the senior consultants who'd resigned from Blackwood just days after my announcement, joined us with his own toast. To new beginnings, and to competence over nepotism. There were only 3 of us for now, me, Marcus, and Veronica Liu, a brilliant junior analyst who had been hired through the company's diversity program and quit when Bennett canceled it. Kate was officially acting as our external counsel, not an employee, but she spent so much time in the office she was practically part of the team. The phone rang, interrupting our small celebration. I answered on speakerphone, keeping a professional tone. Phoenix Strategies, Hadley Blackwood speaking. Hadley. It's Eliza Chen. For a moment, I was speechless. Eliza Chen, CEO of Chen Innovations and Blackwood's most important client, was not who I expected to hear from on our official first day. Eliza, what a surprise. What can I do for you? I'm calling to inform you that Chen Innovations is formally terminating. Its contract with Blackwood Consulting effective immediately. Kate motioned for me to take it off speaker. I did so quickly. I understand, I replied cautiously. May I ask the reason? Bennett's presentation yesterday for our Asia campaign was the final straw, Eliza said, a clear note of frustration in her voice. He obviously hadn't read our briefing, suggested strategies that directly contradicted our corporate values, and when asked about specifics, admitted that his sister usually handled that part. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. The truth is, we've been considering ending the contract since you left. We were just waiting to see if the transition would go more smoothly than we expected. I stayed silent, knowing the conversation was entering delicate territory. Which brings me to the second reason I'm calling, Eliza continued. We'd like to schedule a meeting with you. I understand you've started your own venture? My heart sped up. Yes, we just officially opened today. Perfect. We have a proposal we'd like to discuss. Are you available tomorrow at 10 a.m.? After we confirmed the details and ended the call, I turned to my small team, all watching me with eager expressions. Chen Innovations terminated their contract with Blackwood, I explained, feeling a swirl of emotions. And they want to meet with us tomorrow. They do know we just opened, right? Veronica asked, sounding both excited and nervous. That we're literally 3 people in a rented space? 4, if you count me, Kate corrected with a smile. I don't think that matters to them, I replied. What matters is who we are and what we can offer. Marcus raised his glass again. Here's to surprisingly fast first impressions. The meeting with Eliza and her team the next day felt surreal. They showed up at our tiny co-working space, the CEO, CFO, and Director of Innovation of a tech company, valued at $1.8 billion, and didn't seem the least bit bothered by our modest setup. I like the aesthetic, Eliza commented, eyeing our logo on the wall, an elegant phoenix in shades of blue and gold. Phoenix, rising from the ashes. Fitting. The meeting went better than I could have hoped. Not only did they want us to continue the work I had led at Blackwood, but they were also interested in expanding the scope to include new initiatives. Have 2 main concerns, the CFO said as we discussed terms. First, your capacity with such a small team. Second, potential legal issues with your former employer. Both valid concerns, I replied honestly. As for capacity, we're already in the process of hiring. And as for legal issues, I've been extremely careful to comply with every obligation in my contract. I have not actively approached any Blackwood clients, including you. And let's be clear, Eliza added with a slight smile. We reached out to you entirely on our own. We'd be willing to state that formally if necessary. By the end of the meeting, we had a verbal agreement for an initial 6-month contract, pending approval from their legal team, and ours, as Eliza kindly noted with a nod toward Kate. After they left, Marcus let out a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it for hours. Did that actually just happen? We landed Chen Innovations on our first official day? Looks like it, I replied, still trying to absorb the reality. And something tells me they won't be the last. My prediction proved right faster than any of us could have imagined. Over the next 10 days, we were contacted by 5 other major Blackwood clients, all expressing dissatisfaction with the transition after my departure and interest in our services. Crucially, in every single case, the initiative came from them. I kept meticulous records of each initial contact, fully aware that a storm was brewing. It arrived on a Wednesday morning in the form of a formally worded email from Blackwood Consulting's legal department, signed by my father. Dear Ms. Blackwood, it has come to our attention that you are actively soliciting clients from Blackwood Consulting, in clear violation of your non-compete clause. We demand that you immediately cease all communication with any of our current or former clients from the past 24 months. Failure to comply will result in legal action to protect our legitimate business interests. Sincerely, Victor Blackwood, Chairman Emeritus, Blackwood Consulting. Kate read the email over my shoulder and let out an exasperated sigh. Classic. Did he even bother to check if you actually solicited anyone before sending legal threats? He can't believe that clients would come to me on their own, I said, feeling a pang of sadness beneath my irritation. To him, the only possible explanation is that I'm stealing them. Well, let's clear this up quickly, Kate declared, already grabbing her phone. I'm scheduling a meeting with their legal team, and I'd suggest inviting a few clients to testify, if they're willing. Eliza's already offered, I noted, and I imagine others would too. The resolution came sooner than we expected. 3 days later, we were sitting in a neutral conference room at Kate's office, Kate and I on one side of the table, my father and Blackwood's corporate attorney on the other. Before we get into legal threats, Kate began professionally, we'd like to clarify a few facts. First, my client did not actively reach out to any Blackwood clients. Each contact was initiated by the client after her formal departure from the company. That's hard to believe, the attorney replied skeptically. 6 major clients decide to leave right after she does? Not simultaneously, I corrected. And it's not that surprising, considering I was the main point of contact for most of them for years. We have evidence of improper solicitation, my father stated, sliding a folder across the table. Kate calmly opened it, flipping through the documents, mostly emails between me and the clients now affiliated with Phoenix. All of these interactions occurred after. The clients had formally terminated their contracts with Blackwood, Kate noted. None of this qualifies as solicitation. In fact, we have documentation showing that each client contacted Ms. Blackwood first, not the other way around. How convenient, my father muttered. Frankly, I shot back, my patience wearing thin. Do you really think I had to solicit them? After Bennett's disastrous pitch to Chen? Or when he completely ignored the needs of Midwest manufacturing? Or when he sent that error-ridden proposal to Robertson? An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Clients aren't property, Dad, I continued more softly. They choose who they want to work with, and they chose competence over a last name. Kate stepped in before things got too personal. To resolve this matter definitively, we have signed statements from representatives of each company mentioned, confirming they contacted Phoenix Strategies on their own initiative without any prior solicitation. She slid a folder across the table, thicker than my father's. Furthermore, Kate went on, 3 of those clients have volunteered to testify in person if necessary. Eliza Chen is, in fact, waiting in the lobby should we want her input immediately. Blackwood's attorney quickly flipped through the documents, his face gradually losing its initial confidence. He leaned over to whisper something in my father's ear, who nodded stiffly. It seems there's been a misunderstanding. The attorney finally conceded. Given this evidence, Blackwood Consulting will not pursue legal action at this time. Excellent, Kate replied with a professional smile. I presume we'll receive formal confirmation of that decision? As the final details were discussed, I noticed my father had barely spoken. He watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read, anger certainly, but also something else. Surprise? Reassessment? Perhaps even a hint of reluctant respect? When the meeting ended and the Blackwood representatives prepared to leave, my father finally spoke directly to me. You actually did it, he said, not a question. Built a competing company in a matter of weeks. I didn't have a choice, I replied simply. You showed me there was no future for me at Blackwood. There was always a place for you. A secondary place. It wasn't enough. He adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture he rarely showed. I still think you're making a mistake. Building something from scratch is far harder than taking over something established. Maybe, I agreed. But at least it'll be mine, built on my terms, reflecting my values. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of pride in his eyes, quickly suppressed. Good luck, Hadley, he said finally, his voice softer than usual. You're going to need it. After they left, Kate and I joined Eliza in the lobby, explaining her testimony wouldn't be needed. Pity, Eliza said with a smile. I was looking forward to seeing Victor's face when I explained why we preferred working with you. I think he got the message, I replied, feeling a strange mix of triumph and melancholy, even if he'll never admit it. 2 weeks later, in our increasingly busy office, I received an unexpected visitor. Bennett was standing at reception, looking out of place and visibly uncomfortable. Can we talk? He asked as I approached. Privately, I led him to my office, watching as his eyes took in the space, smaller than my old office at Blackwood, but clearly mine, with vibrant colors and a modern design that would never have been allowed in the family firm's traditional aesthetic. Nice place, he said without much conviction. Thanks. What can I do for you, Bennett? He sat heavily in the chair across from my desk. We're in trouble, Hadley. 6 major clients gone in a month. Projected revenue down 38% for next quarter. 3 senior managers resigned yesterday. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied sincerely. Despite everything, I didn't want to see my father's company, built over decades, completely fall apart. I need you to come back, he said abruptly. I blinked, caught off guard by the bluntness. Excuse me? Come back to Blackwood. Dad is willing to reconsider. Certain decisions. We could be co-presidents. Split responsibilities. I almost laughed. Not out of cruelty, but at the sheer irony of it all. Bennett, look around you. I've built something here. Something that's mine. Why would I go back to be co-anything at a company that systematically undervalued me for a decade? Because it's the family legacy, he argued, sounding uncannily like our father. Because you care about the company. I used to care, I corrected gently. I gave it 10 years of my life, and when the time came to recognize that commitment, I was passed over for you. Bennett had the decency to look embarrassed. I know I shouldn't have accepted the presidency. I wasn't ready. I'm still not. Then why did you take it? Because Dad offered. Because it was expected. Because... He hesitated. Because no one says no to Victor. Blackwood. I did, I said calmly. Silence stretched between us. For a moment, I didn't see Bennett as the privileged brother who had taken my place, but as another pawn on our father's chessboard, placed in a role he wasn't prepared for, expected to perform without the tools he needed. If it's any consolation, he continued when he realized I wouldn't respond to his offer. Dad's sweating bullets. I've never seen him so worried. I think he's finally realizing how much the company depended on you. It's not about me personally, Bennett. It's about competence, vision, real client relationships. These are things that take time to build, and they can't be inherited. So you're not coming back? There was a note of desperation in his voice. No, I'm not coming back. What do we do now? I felt a twinge of sympathy. You learn, really learn the business from the ground up. You listen to the people who have experience, even when they tell you things you don't want to hear. You rebuild the relationships with clients who stayed. And maybe, just maybe, for your sake and the company's, you consider whether the presidency is really the right role for you right now. Bennett was quiet for a long moment, taking in my words. Finally, he nodded. Slowly. She really favored you, you know, he said suddenly. Who? Mom. She always said you had her intelligence and Dad's determination. The best combination, she used to say. I felt a lump rise in my throat. My mother rarely expressed such feelings openly, always careful not to upset my father. She came to see me yesterday, Bennett continued. Said she was proud of what you've done, that maybe I should consider working for you someday. That made me smile, genuinely. A little premature, but I appreciate the sentiment. When Bennett finally stood to leave, he looked both defeated and somehow relieved, like someone who had finally accepted a hard truth. I never meant to hurt you, Hadley, he said, standing at the door. I just never realized how painful. It must have been to always be in the background. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from him. Good luck, Bennett. Truly. After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, reflecting on the winding road that had brought me here. It hadn't been the path I planned, nor the one I had hoped for all those years. It had been far better. We need more space, Marcus declared, trying to navigate through the office that had suddenly become too small. In just 3 months, Phoenix Strategies had grown from 4 to 12 people. Our co-working space, initially comfortable for a small team, now felt claustrophobic. Consultants shared makeshift desks, files cluttered every available surface, and our meetings often spilled into nearby coffee shops due to lack of room. I agree, I replied, watching Rachel, our newest analyst, trying to set up her laptop on a table already covered in documents and presentation materials. I already have a few options in mind. I asked Kate to review the lease contracts this week. The explosive growth had been unexpected, even for me. The initial wave of clients who followed us from Blackwood created a ripple effect. Every successful case brought in referrals, and every referral turned into new business. In 3 months, we hadn't just stabilized, we were expanding into new markets. Our biggest innovation, ironically, was something I had tried for years. To implement at Blackwood without success. A dedicated division for women and minority-led businesses, a sector often overlooked by traditional consultancies. Under Veronica's leadership, that division already accounted for nearly 30% of our revenue. A week later, I signed the lease for our new office, an entire floor in a sleek modern building also in the West Loop, with a view of the Chicago skyline. And whether by coincidence or fate, the Blackwood Tower visible in the distance. This space is perfect, Kate said as we walked through the empty floor, our footsteps echoing on the polished concrete. And the timing couldn't be better. I just got an email from Peterson & Gray's HR office. Peterson & Gray was a fast-growing tech company revolutionizing the digital healthcare sector. They want to hire us? Better, Kate smiled. They want us to evaluate a potential acquisition, a potential 7-figure contract if we close. The deal. I stopped walking, trying to process the magnitude of the news. That would put us in a completely different league. Exactly, Kate nodded. No longer a boutique consultancy, a serious player in the market. I looked out, the window toward the city skyline. Somewhere out there, my father was probably sitting in his office, still trying to make sense of how his disposable daughter had built something so quickly. Do we have the capacity for a project of that scale? I asked, more to myself. Then to Kate. With the current team, it'd be a stretch, but with a few strategic hires, we could pull it off. My thoughts turned to James Harrison, Blackwood's CFO, who had subtly hinted at being open to new opportunities. His experience would be invaluable for a project like this. I've got a few ideas, I replied. Let's schedule a meeting with the executive team tomorrow. I want to make sure we're all aligned before taking on something this significant. Kate watched me with a knowing smile. That right there is why we're growing while Blackwood is shrinking. You actually consult your team before making big decisions. It's how things should be, I replied simply. The meeting with Peterson and Gray exceeded all expectations. Not only were they impressed by our growth and approach, but they were also specifically interested in our division, focused on women and minority-led businesses. We're trying to diversify our acquisition portfolio, explained Sophia Peterson, co-founder and CTO. Traditional consultancies tend to show us the same old options, companies founded and led by white men. We want to look beyond that narrow horizon. By the end of the meeting, a preliminary contract had been drafted, larger, and with a broader scope than we had originally anticipated. On the way back to the office, Marcus looked almost dazed. This is really happening, isn't it? We're actually competing at the same level as firms that have been around for decades. And winning, in many cases, I added. Did you know it would be like this when you left Blackwood? I thought. About the question. Not exactly. I knew I could build something meaningful, something that reflected my values. But the speed, the scale, it's been surprising. I think we underestimated how many people were looking for exactly what we offer, Marcus noted. A merit-based, respectful approach, no rigid hierarchies or outdated politics. And how many talented people were suffocating in environments like Blackwood? I added. James Harrison accepted my offer to join Phoenix as Chief Financial Officer that same week. His departure from Blackwood after nearly 20 years sent shockwaves through the industry. Victor literally yelled when I handed in my resignation, James said as I helped him settle into his new office. He said I was stabbing him in the back and betraying decades of loyalty. I'm sorry to have put you in that position, I offered. James shook his head. Don't be. It was my decision, and honestly, long overdue. Over the past few months, I've watched Blackwood become something I barely recognize. It's gotten that bad? Worse, he sighed. Bennett's trying, I'll give him that. But without you, and with only minimal support, he's made some serious missteps. Victor's trying to micromanage everything from his retirement, which just makes things worse. Part of me felt sorry for them, especially Bennett, thrust into a role he wasn't prepared for. Another part recognized this as the natural consequence of years of decisions made based on hierarchy instead of merit. How's my mother? I asked, shifting to a more personal subject. A small smile tugged at James's lips. She's been surprisingly outspoken lately. At the last board meeting, when Victor started criticizing your tactics for stealing clients, she cut him off, publicly. She said maybe he should consider why clients were willing to follow you instead of blaming you for offering a better alternative. I was genuinely surprised. My mother rarely challenged my father, especially in professional settings. She's been talking a lot about you too, James continued, sharing news clippings and industry mentions. I think she's proud. A wave of unexpected emotion washed over me. For years, I had taken my mother's silence as complicity, her passiveness as approval of the way I was treated. Now, I wondered how much she had been fighting in her own quiet way from the margins of a system that had also limited her. With James on board and 5 new consultants hired, Phoenix was ready to take on the Peterson and Gray project. We moved into our new office over a frenzied weekend, the whole team pitching in to move equipment, set up workspaces, and transform the empty floor into a functional and inspiring environment. Our main conference room was deliberately designed to contrast with Blackwood's aesthetic: glass walls instead of dark wood, an oval table instead of a rectangular one, and most notably, no power seat at the head. It was a space built for collaboration, not hierarchy. It was in that room, 1 week after the move, that I received an unexpected visitor. Your mother's here, Rachel announced, looking slightly confused. Diana Blackwood, my mother, was standing hesitantly at the front desk, looking both out of place and strangely determined. Mom, I greeted her, surprised but genuinely happy to see her. This is unexpected. I hope I'm not interrupting, she replied, glancing around curiously. This place is impressive, Hadley. Thank you. Would you like to see it? As I gave her a tour of the office, introducing her to the team and showing her our spaces, I noticed how she took in every detail. The open, collaborative workstations, the meeting rooms named after pioneering women in business, the overall atmosphere of productive energy. It's so different from Blackwood, she commented when we reached my office. Intentionally, I replied with a small smile. I offered her a chair and sat across from her, not behind my desk. What brings you here, Mom? Not that I don't appreciate the visit, but your father doesn't know I'm here, she finished for me. And I'd prefer to keep it that way, if possible. Of course. She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. I came because I wanted to see it with my own eyes. What you built. What you created when you finally had the freedom to follow your own vision. The sincerity in her voice touched me. And what do you think? I think it's extraordinary, she replied, an unusual emotion coloring her usually composed voice. Not just the growth, the commercial success, though that's undeniably impressive, but the kind of environment you've created. The people here seem engaged, valued. That was the goal. She looked down at her hands, tightly clasped in her lap. Do you remember when you were about 12, sitting in your father's office after school, doing homework while he worked? I nodded, the memory surfacing vividly. You always had ideas, suggestions on how things could be done differently, more efficiently, more fairly. She smiled faintly. Your father dismissed them as naive childhood fantasies, but I always wondered what Blackwood might have been if he'd actually listened. Well, now you know, I said softly. Now I know, she agreed. Then suddenly, I'm leaving your father, Hadley. I was momentarily speechless. Mom, it's not impulsive, she continued quickly. I've been considering it for years, decades to be honest. But seeing what you've done, how you refused to accept limitations that didn't make sense, how you had the courage to build something of your own, it was the final inspiration I needed. I never meant to cause a rupture in the family, I said, a complex mix of emotions rising in me. You didn't cause it, she said firmly. You simply showed me another possibility, what life can look like when we break free of expectations that never truly served us. A gentle knock on the door interrupted our conversation. Kate poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but the Peterson and Gray meeting starts in 10 minutes. Thank you, Kate. I'll be there in a moment. My mother stood. I don't want to delay your work. I just wanted you to know. I'm proud of you, Hadley. More than I can put into words. I stood too, and after a moment's hesitation, I hugged her, something we rarely did in our emotionally reserved family. To my surprise, she hugged me back tightly. Call me if you need anything, I offered as I walked her to the door. Anything at all. I will, she promised. At the door, she turned one last time. You know what's funny? Your father always talked about the Blackwood legacy, how he built something to pass, down through the generations. But I think you're the one who truly understood what it means to create a legacy. It's not about carrying on a name. It's about building something that reflects your values, something that truly makes a difference. After she left, I stood still for a moment, taking in her words. The legacy my father cherished was fixed, unchanging, a monument to the past. What I was building was alive, adaptable, future-focused. And maybe, I thought as I headed toward the Kia conference room where my team was waiting, that was the real meaning of inheritance. So, I want to thank everyone who believed in Phoenix Strategies when it was just an idea, a dream of doing consulting differently. I'm finishing my acceptance speech, the weight of the Breakthrough Consulting Firm of the Year, glass trophy surprisingly solid in my hands. The audience, a sea of familiar and unfamiliar faces, erupts into enthusiastic applause. But above all, I continue, my eyes finding my mother in the back row, I want to thank those who doubted me, who closed doors, thinking they were keeping me boxed in. You showed me I needed to build my own house, with my own doors, open to those who value competence over tradition, innovation over hierarchy, and respect over privilege. I pause for a beat, savoring the final words. After all, a phoenix doesn't rise to rebuild the same nest. She flies to create something entirely new. The applause swells as I step off the stage, several people rising in a standing ovation I hadn't expected. Among the smiling faces, I see my team, not just 3 people in a co-working space anymore, but 22 dedicated professionals who chose to believe in my vision. Kate meets me backstage, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. Perfect speech, not too conciliatory, not overly vengeful. I accept the glass with a smile. I've been practicing balance. Attention, everyone. Marcus's voice cuts through the buzz of the post-awards reception. A toast to our visionary leader, who proved that sometimes you need to be rejected by what doesn't serve you to find where you truly belong. To Hadley, a chorus of voices responded, glasses raised high. As I moved through the room, exchanging congratulations and business cards, a familiar and unexpected figure at the entrance caught my eye. My father stood alone, observing the scene with an unreadable expression, an untouched glass of whiskey in his hand. For months, I had imagined what our next encounter would be like. In some scenarios, I was cold and professional. In others, confrontational and accusatory. In none of them did he show up, willingly to an event celebrating my success. Kate followed my gaze. Want me to step in? No, it's okay, I reply, surprising us both. I think I should talk to him. As I approach, I notice how my father looks both the same and different. Same rigid posture, same impeccable suit. But there's a tiredness in his eyes, something that wasn't there before. Dad, I greet him, keeping my voice neutral. I didn't expect to see you here. I hadn't planned on coming, he admits, his voice lower than usual. But your mother strongly suggested I should see for myself. Even after the divorce, she still manages to make you listen from time to time. A reluctant smile tugs at the corner of his lips. Some things never change. We fall into silence for a moment, watching the celebration around us. He's the one who finally breaks it. Impressive, he says, gesturing vaguely at the event, the people, the trophy I had placed on a nearby table. What you've built in such a short time. Thank you, I reply, genuinely surprised by the unqualified praise. Blackwood never won that particular award, he notes almost to himself. We were always seen as too traditional. Sometimes tradition is just another word for stagnation, I comment, then immediately regret the combative tone. But there's value in longevity too. Blackwood held firm when many other consultancies failed. He nods, acknowledging my attempt at peace. How's Bennett? The question catches me off guard. I haven't spoken much with him in the past few months. From what I hear, things have been challenging. They have, my father confirms. We lost nearly 40% of our revenue after you left, more layoffs than hires. We had to sell a floor of our office space. There's no satisfaction in hearing that, only a quiet sadness for the business I once saw as my future. Bennett is finally growing up, he continues, surprising me again. Not in the way I expected, but maybe in the way he needed. Taking responsibility, learning from mistakes, listening to the team that stayed. That's good to hear, I reply honestly. My father takes a sip of his whiskey, then looks directly at me. Maybe I was wrong. The words hang between us, the closest thing to an apology he could offer. About what part? I ask softly. Several parts, he admits, and I can see how much it costs him to say it. But mostly, not recognizing what was right in front of me all these years. I feel an unexpected emotion rising in my throat. It wasn't about the title, Dad. It was never really about being president. It was about respect, he finishes for me. About recognition. About being seen for who you really are. Yes. He glances around the room again, at the lively groups of people, the phoenix logo projected on the wall. Well, I think we all see you now. A silence falls between us, not exactly comfortable, but not hostile either. Just the silence of two people who share a complicated history, trying to find a new balance. Blackwood will survive, my father says finally. Smaller, different, but still relevant. Bennett is finding his own way. Not the path I had planned for him, but maybe a better one. And you? I ask, genuinely curious. A small, melancholic smile appears on his face. I'm learning to live alone for the first time in 4 decades. I'm learning that maybe I mistook rigidity for strength. And I'm learning, he pauses meaningfully, that legacies rarely take the shape we imagined. He extends his hand formally. Congratulations, Hadley. You've built something remarkable here. I accept his handshake, feeling the weight of history between us. Thank you. As he turns to leave, I add, I'll be in Chicago for Thanksgiving lunch at Mom's next week. She mentioned you'd be there too. He looks momentarily surprised. Yes, we agreed to keep a few family traditions despite the changes. Maybe we can talk more. As respectful rivals, not as disappointed father and daughter. Something softens in his eyes. I'd like that. After he leaves, Kate approaches me again. You okay? Surprisingly, yes, I reply. Not exactly reconciliation, but acknowledgement. It's more than I expected. You deserve more than acknowledgement, Kate notes. You deserve an apology, validation, and I built my own validation. I gently interrupt. This award, this company, this team, I created something that doesn't need his approval to thrive. Kate smiles, understanding. And maybe that's the greatest victory of all. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I place the trophy on the shelf beside an old photo. Me at 12, sitting at my father's desk at Blackwood, school notebooks scattered around while he worked in the background. For so many years, I tried to measure my worth by the standards set in that office, in that company, by that man. I spent a decade trying to prove I deserved a seat at the table he built. I never realized I could, that I should, build my own table. My phone buzzes with a text from Eliza Chen. That Asia contract we discussed? Approved. Twice the original scope. Get your team ready for a trip to Singapore in January. I smile, feeling that familiar rush of excitement for a new challenge. The same feeling that carried me through the darkness of those early months, when I left the comfort of the known for the potential of the possible. On my desk sits a stack of resumes. Phoenix is still growing, needing more talent, more voices, more perspectives. Among them, surprisingly, is an application from a young analyst at Blackwood with a note attached. Recommended by Bennett Blackwood. Exceptional talent who deserves more opportunities than we can currently offer. A small gesture, perhaps. A quiet acknowledgement that some people deserve more than he now understands Blackwood can provide. I glance out the window at the Chicago skyline, the lights of the skyscrapers glowing against the dark sky. Somewhere out there is the Blackwood building, where I spent so many years trying to prove my worth. And here I am, in an apartment I bought with the success of my own company, looking at the same city, but from an entirely new perspective. The true legacy, I realize now, isn't what we receive from others. It's what we build for ourselves. It's what we leave for those who come after. Not a name or a title, but examples of courage, vision, and the determination to create something better. The phoenix doesn't just rise from the ashes. She transcends her past, turning destruction into creation, endings into beginnings, rejection into possibility. And maybe, in the end, that's the story I was always meant to write.